Welcome to the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast. In this space, we're going to talk about the losses we don't always have the language for. Because grief isn't only about losing someone we love. Sometimes it's the end of a relationship, a friendship that's faded, a dream that's changed, or the life we thought we'd have. In this series, we're naming all kinds of grief that often go unseen, and we're going to learn how to move through them with compassion. On this episode, we're going to talk about the grief that men carry. We're going to talk about the boy who was told not to cry and the grief of being misunderstood. In a world that often makes men feel like their feelings are invalid, that no one cares, or that we're not here to listen, the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast has you covered today with my special guest, Gary Jones, LCSW. Share, tag a friend, let them know that the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast is back, and we have a wonderful episode. You want all the men and boys in your life to tune in. Welcome to the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast. I am so excited to be back. I have received such great feedback from our series on grief, and I have decided to extend the topic. You all shared such amazing, positive feedback, and just knowing that you are feeling seen, heard, and understood lets me know that it is all worth it. So this is the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast, and we are going to continue our conversation on grief, but not just death, loss, and divorce. We're going to talk about the grief that we don't always have language for. It could be the end of a relationship, a friendship that's faded, or a dream that has changed or just hasn't come to pass. Or it can be the life that we thought we would have. We're not just going to talk about it, but we're going to give you tools on how to manage this grief. Grief that society doesn't validate, grief that makes you feel like you are in this alone. Well, you are not in it alone, because we are here to let you know that there are ways to manage this grief. We're going to also move through this topic with compassion. We want you to feel comforted in what we share. So, of course, when people hear the word grief, they think about death. Sometimes you might think about divorce, but there's so many other losses that we experience. And I want to make sure that as a community, a society, we are equipped to handle grief, okay, in its totality. So the grief that we don't always have the language for, the words for, we had to take some special time. Now, I can talk all day about women's issues. I can talk all day about the things that women go through. But it is very clear that we have to make some time for the men. It is a different experience, and it is actually a difficult experience to walk through, even as a helper, to support men who are feeling some of the grief that society talk about, invalidation. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to get into this topic. We have a special guest, and we almost forgot all about y'all on the podcast because we were just having such a great conversation, but we said, let's get this podcast started and welcome the people into our conversation. This episode on the boy who was told not to cry. It's going to be a good one. So tag, share, let everybody know that the Self-Care Sound Mind podcast is back. And we want you, the mother, the sister, the spouse, the friend, the auntie, not only listen, but also share it with the men, the boys, the fellas in your life, to let them know that we see them and that we hear them. And this is how you can help them, but we can also give them some tools to help themselves. So I'm going to welcome my wonderful guest, Mr. Gary Jones. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me and for inviting me, to your viewers and everything. Just thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy that we are having this conversation. I am intentional in having this conversation with a man.
Mhm,
And I'm excited because I have another, first of all, let me just say
mhm,
that male therapist, black male therapists to be exact, are like unicorns. Okay. You know they exist
mhm.
and they're out there,
Yes.
right? But the reason why I say they're unicorns is because
Mhm.
it's almost like you don't have to require you don't require much marketing. If you know one, you refer it, you refer the client, they're full, you know what I mean? A black male therapist can start a practice today, they're gonna be full tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's because the need is so great. And
Mhm,
that's not to say that, black men only need to go to black men, but because there is a way for a man to help a man that sometimes there that connection, that relationship, that level of understanding. uh,
mhm,
I've had many male clients, so it's not like it can't work,
mhm,
but
mhm.
I think there's something special about the relationship that you all can offer that we just can't. And so thank you for all of your time in the field. um, I can't even imagine the amount of lives that you have touched, that you have impacted and changed just for your sacrifice and your work. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you for what you do. I like I said,
Mhm.
it's something about having, to be able to say, "Oh, I know someone you can call." Yeah. So tell the
Right.
people about you. Tell them about what you do and your work and all the things.
Wow. Let me see. Okay. Well, I mean, I am the owner of Surviving Today LLC. And basically, I believe in just being totally honest and being
Mhm.
totally realistic in what we do. So there's a part of therapy where we feel like we have to pretend,
Mhm.
but we don't want to have to pretend. And I think
Right.
that, and I think that as black male therapists, I think that we understand that people will know if we're pretending, if we're not pretending. So you don't have to go to a black male therapist. If you are a person that goes to someone else, that is fine. You have to go to who you feel comfortable going with.
Mhm.
um and I definitely would say that without apprehension. I so like yeah, like what you understand, like, you have black men that you see, you have black women that you see, so you don't it's not necessarily that you can't, but when you need someone that you feel as though that can hear you on
Mhm.
certain topics that maybe another person can't. And it doesn't make them less of a therapist.
Right.
It just means that maybe you feel that this person might be able to hear you a
Yeah.
little bit better, might be able to feel you, might be able to see you a little bit better, then that's where you should go.
It's
And
about
I
connection, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that this topic alone, like the boy who was told not to cry,
Mm.
is a very important Is a very important piece because we are often told not to cry, and it's ingrained into what we know. So, like, it sort of builds into what we see as masculinity, what we see as
Mhm.
emotional development. And it impacts our relationships on how we look at things when we're told that we can't cry, when we're told that we can't express our relationships and
Hmm.
when we're taught that way, it will impact the way that we see our relationships, and I think that's what.
Absolutely. The way that our children are shaped, right? Like the way that we impact our children is the messaging that we give. And the emotional message that we give young boys, for the sake of this conversation, and to be honest, in our community, in the Black community, there is this message of don't cry, be tough. You know what I mean? Like, I often see that the only emotion that we allow young boys to express is anger.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
the emotional messages, it shapes our childhood. And as we know, how we think and understand life in our childhood shapes our view of the world. It shapes our behavior. It has an impact on what we do, how we think. It's ingrained in everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if the only thing we're allowed to be is happy or angry, it seems like there's no room for anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
That vulnerability seems to be, a bad word, a word that we don't talk about. It's something we are not allowed to speak
Mhm.
about and or be.
One of the things I think, and when we deal with this topic, we have to understand that we are allowed to. I mean, to be happy and to be angry are the
Hmm.
two things that we're allowed to be, but we're not really allowed to be angry, because now we're penalized when we're angry.
Right,
You know,
right.
yeah, we're
So,
penalized.
so when I say that, just to clarify, because I agree with you 100%, I think more so in children, it's like we tend to, we want them to stop crying, but if we can let them be angry and fight it out, right? Like there is, it's just
Yeah,
idle things. It's like, well, as a child, you're not penalized for being angry
right.
until anger is the only thing you're
True,
able to express.
true,
And then you grow up angry,
true, true. Yes, yes.
and
That
then you're penalized for your anger.
that is definitely true. That is definitely true. It's like, but we. I think that a lot of times it's in the messaging. It,
Hmm.
it really is in the messaging. The way that we're taught is that you got to be tough, and then
Right.
what does tough looks like? Okay, what does it look like? I mean, you got to be unaffected. But
Mm.
what does unaffected look like? I mean, what does that show itself out to be? So men are often taught to don't cry,
Mhm.
man up, you got this, man. In other words, there's no portion in there in which you're allowed to be weak.
Mm.
So we grow up into this situation where this toughness, we're not allowed to be weak. And but but what that does is that it suppresses things. It actually suppresses what we're able to look at, and what we're able to do, and how we're able to just transform into to being a total individual. So
Mm.
your boys are often taught not to, like, just not to deal with those
Yes.
emotions at all, and that makes us more vulnerable. Although
The
when we
vulnerability we're not allowed to feel
that we're not allowed to
actually
feel,
being
but we do it to try not to be
right.
vulnerable. So therefore, because as a black man, there's so many things that can happen. So when you are young and you're black, and a black man, what can happen is that if you allow those tears to
Mm.
show, if you allow that emotions to show, what can happen is that you can become a mark.
Mm,
you can become, you can be, I mean, or
a
it
target.
appears that you
Yeah.
can become that person where now people are picking on you.
Mm,
Now they, and then what happens is that a lot of men a lot of men, they learn how to learn how to sort of like, I guess, man up, because they don't want to be marks. They don't want to
right.
be vulnerable. A I don't know if you're watching this, but there's a show. There's a show on Stars called Raising Canaan.
Mm,
uh, One of the very first episodes in Raising Canaan is that uh the boy, he's out there, he gets beat up, the character, the prime character, Canaan, he's a young kid, but he gets beat up.
mm,
And he goes home, and his mom comes in and she's looking for him, like, what's going on, etc. He's crying out, he's crying his eyes out. He's like, oh, they beat me up, such and such, such and such. The mom made him get dressed, and they took him back to where he
mm,
was at, and said, "Look, it's either you got to deal with them or you got to deal with me."
mhm.
Okay. Now she put something inside his, like a like coins inside a sock or something like that, and basically, yeah, it was like you and me. So he proceeded to beat the boy. Okay, but that was how he ended up not having to, like, worry about being bullied
Mhm.
anymore. But it also suppressed a few things in him that maybe
Right.
shouldn't have done. So yeah.
It's interesting. You said something earlier about uh being unaffected by emotion
Mm,
when you are taught this message to continually suppress your emotion, right?
mhm,
And what I find now, working with having two little boys, right?
mhm,
3 and 8.
mhm,
They're my boys are emotional, right? Because they're kids.
mhm,
And but one, my oldest, he's like me. He in the sensitivity realm.
mhm.
That 3-year-old, he don't care about nobody's emotions, right? But but his own when he's upset, right? He gonna let everybody know when he
Mm,
my leg, But so it's not innate for young boys to not be emotional. That's not something that is a
mhm,
part of their
mhm.
nature.
Yeah.
That man up culture, tough it out, right? And I understand what you're saying. In many cultures and societies, it's kind of like kill or be killed, right? And and unfortunately, what I see in a lot of adult men who come to therapy is their inability to emote because
Mhm,
they have suppressed their emotion
mhm,
to the point of numbness, right?
mhm,
Where it's almost reconnecting to your body,
mhm,
reconnecting to the things that impact you. Because once you are not affected anymore,
mhm.
then you begin to do things like
Mhm.
kill without a thought,
Yeah.
take from people and not care about the result. You're
Mhm,
able to only think about yourself and your survival
mhm,
when there is no impact, no
mhm,
effect.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
and we're trying to figure out, how could a person do such a thing? Well, we've taken their ability to feel anything away.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I think as men, what happens is that we repeatedly practice this.
Mm,
We don't recognize that we're doing it, but we are. It becomes a pattern.
yeah,
So it becomes a pattern that we become used to doing, honestly, without even realizing that we're doing
yeah.
that we're doing it. And
And
some of the things I
this is
know.
not to bash, because I can hear the people saying, "Oh, you just want people to, you just want weak men, and you just want, we're not saying that, but
No,
we do want men who
we
are
want
healthy enough to feel
we want and we what we want is emotionally stable men. Okay,
right,
that's what we want. I mean, nobody wants a person that is going to whine and constantly, like beat domestic violence, stuff like
right,
that. We don't want a man like that,
right,
and yeah, and I can hear people saying that we're saying, oh, you just want a man. No, but I think if that's what you're thinking, then you're getting the wrong idea about what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that we want a person that can be able to identify what
yeah,
they're feeling. You
yeah,
want someone that's going to be able to be able to really be able to explain and communicate what they're feeling.
yeah,
And I think that when you have a person, especially when we're in this man up culture, you end up having men who are unable to do that. Once again, not every man is unable to do that. But I do believe that this is a problem with this man up culture.
yeah,
Once again, we're not saying don't step up, don't be men, but you gotta be responsible men. You
yes. Be
gotta be
the healthy version of the man,
yes,
where
yeah,
you can still have, experiences in life, right? You
exactly.
can still feel strong, you can still feel, you know
Hmm.
like this leader you want to be, but one with a healthy emotional intelligence, to know when you are upset about something and you're not taking it out on someone else because you don't know how to handle what you feel,
And
right?
oftentimes that's what happens. So men in this situation will grow up not knowing how to regulate their emotions. They
Hmm.
grow up not learning how to find ways to get through, healthy ways to
Right.
get through a conflict. They don't know how to do this. And so I guess what I'm saying is that nobody starts out this way, but there
Right.
are some people that end up this way.
Right.
Nobody starts out planning to be emotionally unattached to something, but at the same time, these things do happen. And once again, it doesn't mean that every man's going to feel this way,
Right.
but what it means is that some men do end up this way. Now, the reality is that some men who were taught to sort of like avoid their emotions and stuff like that, often end up being okay. We need to recognize that too, because, like, for example, I know me myself, I was a person who was taught that you shouldn't cry. If you got to cry, you need to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I made sure that if I had I, in the family that I grew up in, it wasn't safe to cry, so I didn't cry. I didn't cry in front of people. I put it that way. I cried outside of that. I made sure that I went somewhere. I sat on the step at school, to make sure that nobody saw me. Then I did whatever I had to do, and then I walked back out to whatever, and then I walked into my role in life, I guess, at that
Mm-hmm.
particular point, or at least what I thought was my role. But that wasn't what I wanted to do, but I
Right.
had to adapt to do that.
And let's just take a moment to appreciate that, because even though it wasn't safe for you to cry, right, you received the same message, but you
Mhm,
still found a way to express what you needed to express in the moment,
mhm,
figure out what to do next, and then move on. And that right there is what we want our clients to do. I don't know how many times a week I repeat, feel your feelings, because they deserve to be felt and
mhm,
expressed.
mhm,
Let's think about the situation and let's figure out what we're going to do. Feel your feelings, but don't get stuck. Feel
Exactly.
your feelings, allow yourself that human emotional experience, and then let's figure out how do we continue,
Exactly.
because feeling it is not going to be the only solution, but it's
Exactly.
a part of the process. And
Exactly.
so even as a child, you were able to find a way to do it in a healthy manner. You knew you couldn't do it at home,
Mm-mm. Not at
but you
all.
found a way to do it, which is what allowed you to, get to the other side of it,
Mm-hmm.
which is so important. And I think that's, one of the main things that we want people to understand is that while um, there is this messaging, and in a lot of ways, you know, like you said, that vulnerability can end up making you a target, right? The anger
Mm-hmm.
that we allow as children um,
Mm-hmm.
is no longer allowed as adolescents and adults, right? Because now you're labeled as angry.
Yeah.
Your behavior is uncontrolled. You don't have this ability to regulate, and then when you get in these tough life situations,
Mm-hmm.
now instead of learning to regulate yourself in that situation, you're blowing up. Things are escalating in a way it doesn't need to,
Mm-hmm.
or you're not, you know what I mean, or because you feel threatened, that fight or flight only knows how to fight. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's
Exactly. Exactly.
it's interesting because it also has, like we said, the messaging in childhood has an impact as an adult. And I think about all the relationships and children who are then born into this same type of messaging. And
Mm-hmm.
so then you do have, domestic violence because you felt disrespected, and because you
And
can't have
sometimes,
the discussion,
and
right?
sometimes because sometimes domestic violence happens and it should never happen.
Right. Of course.
let's let's
Disclaimer.
let's yeah, let's make sure that we're clear. It should never happen. There's no reason for us, for any one of us, to put our hands on the other. That there's no reason. So we're not even saying that there's a reason, but sometimes there's underlying reasons for why it might happen. Okay, in other words, as kids, being unable to express what we need to express, or finding a safe way to express that, so now it comes out in other ways, like domestic
Hmm.
violence. Once again, not saying that
Right.
it
Make
not
it
saying, not
plain.
making it plain that that is never a viable excuse for doing that, but understanding how some things happen. First of all, understanding that grief, a lot of this is grief, it's
Absolutely.
unexplained grief that we don't recognize that that's exactly what it is. So we're playing out things that we've never really realized, or realized that we could express. Okay.
Hmm.
And so it's the grief of those things that yeah,
It's the
the
grief
grief,
of
yeah.
like wishing that you is it's almost like I wish I knew that when I needed to know it,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
the grief of not being allowed
Mhm.
to manage your emotions in a healthy, well-rounded way.
Exactly.
To be allowed to have a natural human experience, to be allowed to be a kid.
Hmm. One
You
of
know
the
what I
things,
mean?
exactly. So I wrote down notes too, so I can remember some things. But one of the things I think that we don't recognize, and I think part of this goes into what we, emotional resilience, and then what we call emotional avoidance. I think when we look at this, there are some things that boys are not taught. you
Mm,
know um you know we're not taught that we can be strong and still be sad.
mm,
So there's that part where we're not taught. We're taught that if you're strong, you can't be sad. There's no way that you can be sad. But the
yeah.
reality is that oftentimes, we are sad, and but because we're not allowed to discuss it and to develop it, a lot of times those things happen. A lot of times it's, we say to ourselves that You can be afraid, or we can't be afraid, but well, you can be afraid and still act courageously.
Right. Right.
There's a way in which it's okay to be afraid. And a lot of times we are oftentimes afraid of situations, and because we're afraid, we will act in certain manners.
Yes.
We're told that we're told that we realize that, or we have to realize that we can be angry without hurting other people. You know, that
Mhm.
but a lot of times we're not taught that. A lot of times we're not taught that, hey, you can be angry, okay, but you don't have to hurt other folk. You don't have to hurt them with the way you feel and say and
Mm,
express themselves. And because sometimes the things that we say, uh, we can't take those things back.
yes.
Okay, we can't take those things back.
It's interesting. You're told what you can't do, but
Hmm.
you're never told what to do instead.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I can't cry.
Hmm.
I can't be emotional. But
Hmm.
what do I do with the fact that I am feeling the emotions you say I cannot feel?
And that
How do
becomes.
I replace this? How do I handle this? What do I do? And so now I'm either full of it, full
Hmm.
of the emotion, which comes
Hmm.
out in some, behavior, rage. Um, I'm full of emotion and
Hmm.
I'm ready to explode, or I learn that I need to disconnect altogether. There was something I saw the other day.
Hmm.
It was an old post, but it popped up on my timeline because someone reshared it, and
Okay.
it made me so sad.
What's
It made me so sad. So the post was like, it was a black female, and she made the post and said, "Black men, this is a safe space. I just want you to know that we love you and we are there for you, and we're here for whatever you need." Something. It was like an appreciation
that?
post. Like, we
Hmm.
see you, we hear you, this is a safe space. And there were thousands of comments.
Hmm.
Like, this is a joke. This ain't no safe space. This is a trap. Like,
Oh.
don't take the bait. Why would I be vulnerable just for you to use it against me later on? Like, this is just all that they're looking for, ammo for the next argument.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
it was like, mm, and you know what the message I got was,
Hmm.
and it made me think, right?
Okay.
Just as an individual, the message was, I tried that with you and you use it against me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
tried that with you and you proved
Yeah.
me wrong.
Hmm. Yeah.
I tried,
Hmm.
right? Because there's a lot of,
Yeah.
I get it all the time, there's a lot of people
Yeah.
who want their partners to communicate, who
Hmm.
want their husbands to be open and honest, and wants them to talk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been there.
All of us have been there at some point. Listen, I have been. I'm not ashamed to say that, I have sometimes been totally wrong. And a lot of times I've been really wrong. Okay. In my relationships, and I mean in situations, and I but here's the difference. I also somehow learned that I needed to hear that person out. I need
Mm,
my wife out. I need to hear, my daughter out. I need to hear things. And you know, I realized that I didn't know everything. I
mm,
don't know everything. And there's a place, there's a quiet place where we just have to say I'm sorry.
mm.
Yeah. Um,
Because we're not gonna always get it right.
we're not going to always get it right. And but I think back to what you were saying, the post that you said, I mean, that's really sad, because
Yeah.
I think that person was being genuine. And
Yeah.
then folk, and I'm assuming it might have been mostly guys, but I'm not,
Mhm.
okay, that felt as though, partially because that might have been their is partially it might have been their experience, but also their experience was skewed by their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we feel as though that the other person can't um, like say to us what they need to say to us. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we maybe the way we say that we're wrong is up because all of us are we're dealing with situations and this person's way of dealing with it might not have been the way the other person dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's a right way, there's a wrong way. But and I think a lot of times that's where we as therapists come in at because I
Right.
think that we often end up having to tell people or resort to people telling folk how okay maybe you should try it this way or
Right.
have you considered doing it this way, maybe
Right.
that might not have been the thing that might have been so I think that that's where we come into play a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times we just don't know. I can just say from a male viewpoint, we're just not allowed to express that. And then we get
Yes.
then after a while, it gets to a point where you don't know how to express it.
Right. So there's this idea too that well, one, from the post is like you're not a safe space, but then on the other hand, it's this idea of disagreement means disrespect,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
that's not always the case either, where it's like I can be a sounding board for you, I can hear
Mhm.
you, but
Mhm.
I don't have to necessarily agree with you
Agree.
to,
Mhm.
what I mean? Agreement doesn't always equate
Yeah.
respect or
Yeah. Yeah.
understanding. Like I hear you and I value your opinion, but I
Yeah.
may not agree. But then I feel like it goes back to this idea where I don't feel it's just a men's issue, but oftentimes it does show up in uh
Mhm. Yeah.
in black men, and why it's so hard at times um to kind of break through
Mhm.
and allow that finding the sense of safety is this idea of being misunderstood, right? Because
Mhm.
there's so many things that society misunderstands when
Mhm.
it comes to um, black men,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And what has happened
Mhm.
is this emotional masking, right?
Mhm.
We talk about code switching, right? And you might be
No,
able
I
to
know.
operate in different settings, but it's
Mhm.
also an emotional masking where you can't be safe enough or feel safe enough to be your full self,
I agree. I agree.
because there are going to be parts of you, or there may be parts of you that are misunderstood.
Mhm.
And so whether you're wearing a hoodie or a suit
Mm.
might determine how
Mm.
you're perceived as an individual.
Mhm. That's true.
I can wear a lab coat Monday through Friday, but if I want to go, work out and wear a hoodie or
Yeah.
wear a jersey or whatever, then I'm looked at differently. I'm misunderstood or misrepresented by
Mhm.
the majority,
Yeah.
just because of my appearance, or I have to mask how I really feel
Mm.
because I don't get to feel different than you do.
Yeah. No, you're right. No, I mean, I think that there's a part where all of that plays a part. I mean, and I think that that becomes part of a more expansive conversation.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know, more expansive than what we got to
A lot
talk
of deep
about.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, but it's a lot of deep work because I think what happens is that a lot of it plays out in how historically we've raised our kids. I mean,
Mhm.
the resilient nature in which we've had to do that. And I think I mean because I think a lot of this goes back to slavery, but then what
Yeah.
we're not going we won't get into that right now.
But
But
it does.
but it does,
It
it
goes
does.
back. It goes back
Yeah.
to not being able to live a full human experience,
It's
right?
it's
But
mm,
but even when I think about, like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we teach men, young boys, children, how to express themselves in a healthy manner when we're still voluntarily or involuntarily giving this message of it's not safe to have these various emotions, or we're telling them to uh we're encouraging a sense of loneliness, so to speak, because the vulnerability that comes with connection, it might require you to be honest about how you feel if you want to have a full connection with someone.
Well, I would say to you that I think that honestly, I think it is involved making sure. I think that it involves us making sure that we have healthy and healed men in the lives of our kids.
Mm,
I really think that I think it boils down to that because you can't teach soundness if you don't know soundness. You can't you can't teach it. You can't make it make sense if
yeah.
it doesn't make sense to the person that's talking. So
Mhm.
what I'm saying is that everybody has different people have different places in our lives. But
Right.
I think that what we need to try to do is identify men and when I say, and I'm not saying this is not a female thing where you have to do it. I mean, all of us have
Hmm.
to be able to look. I mean, myself as a man, I need to look for other men that who I know are sound in what they're thinking, sound in their emotions, sound in every aspect of their lives. Not perfect,
Right.
sound.
Right.
Okay. And I need to look for them and I need to ask them to come into my life and into the life of my children. Help show my young man, what it's like to be to be a man and the proper way and
Right.
to be a man. And I hope I'm saying that the right way. But I mean, we have lessons that are given to us through media and stuff like that make you feel that this is the way to be a man. But we need sound men to come into young boys' life and be able to say, this, have you tried this? Would
Hmm.
maybe you should try this. Definitely don't go that way.
Hmm.
And I really think that, yeah, some young men may not register for
Hmm.
right away, but there are some young men that will. And I think that when we put that into their lives,
Yeah.
they may not get it right away or get all of it right away. These are sometimes 15, 16, 17 year old. And you're not going to
At
ask
that
them,
point, you've already had all those years of the messaging to tell you to go the other way.
but it becomes continual. And
And that's why positions like coaches and mentors and barbers and therapists and
yes.
and the community as a whole,
Mhm.
that's why the impact is so great, because you have someone say, you know what, listen, mm,
Mhm.
let's try it this way, you know what I mean? And so I appreciate
Exactly.
that. I saw this statistic the other day where I think we have the highest rate
Mhm.
of black marriages
Mm.
lasting
Oh,
in like history. Like something about like the highest rate of like either
okay.
two-parent households, and black families, or like the rate of the length of marriages, and what I felt in that was the work is being done. You know what I mean? Like the uh the work is being done. And that's not to say that you can't have healthy men who are not raised in a two-parent household, but the fact that
Mhm.
men are getting healthy enough to impact relationships, to stay healthy enough
Yes.
to rear families in a healthier way.
Exactly.
So the work is being done, and the work can continue to go across barriers, because
Exactly.
whether you're in our home or not, we're able to share this idea that a better way is out there.
Exactly. Exactly.
Unfortunately, there are some people who have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
There are people who are smart enough to say, listen, I didn't like the hard way, let me help you from coming down this path. I'm very
Exactly.
much oh, did that burn you? Yeah, then I don't want to do it. I learned by example. I don't need to touch the fire. I need to
Exactly.
just see from yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
There
Right.
you
But
go.
there are some people who need to touch the fire
Yeah.
that then come back and say, don't do that.
And
Right.
then, and then we allow those people who touch the fire to we recognize that it's okay once you realize now you come on home. That's
Yes.
all right. You recognize it's okay.
Yes. I am thoroughly enjoying this conversation, because the idea that um just the knowledge that is being shared can help someone then go and pass it on. Information like this is it's life changing, right? And I want to encourage someone out there who may have a son, who may have a brother, who may have a friend or a spouse who is actively learning to feel okay with their feelings,
Yeah.
right? Um, how can you, or what advice would you share to a person who is trying to learn how to do that?
Oh wow. I mean, I would probably say that it's a trial and error type of thing. I mean, it's a learning process that you if you don't if you don't know like what you don't know right now doesn't mean that you won't know it.
Mm,
So you got to keep learning. So there's a process of learning that just means that and that process of learning comes through I mean we're therapists, okay, but it
mm,
also comes through the barbershop. It
mhm.
comes from sometimes folk on the corner, just who are uh, sound folk on the corner.
Right, right, right,
Okay,
right.
you know what I'm saying? It can come through that too. I mean, I would just say just listening and learning and finding out what works for you,
Mhm,
doesn't work for you, and then learning other things. So
mhm.
that's what I would probably say.
And what I think about too is when you're used to not being, whether you were allowed or you just don't know how to feel your feelings,
Mhm.
um, feeling it again is uncomfortable.
It can be. It definitely
But
can.
it's okay to sit in the discomfort for a little bit, because even pain
Mhm.
is a reminder that you're alive.
Exactly.
And I would rather be alive to feel pain.
Mm. Than not be alive. And well, okay, okay. So
So it's uncomfortable,
yes,
right? But it doesn't have to always be
it
uncomfortable. And
doesn't.
sometimes the discomfort is in, you know, shedding the weight
And it's not.
of
Yeah.
what you learned
Hmm.
and being open to something different.
And it's not always going to be. And the issues with learning is that it's not going to always be uncomfortable.
Hmm.
You'll have moments where it is, but you'll have moments. You'll have moments of clarity where you recognize, I get it. And
Yeah.
when you get it, you get it forever.
And the thing about it too is, when you've been told one thing, or
Mhm.
even if telling yourself, right? Like, when it comes to, like, self-esteem issues, I'll say, like, if you've been telling yourself that you're ugly for 25 years, you're not going to believe a positive affirmation
No,
looking in the mirror and saying I'm beautiful one time.
no, you're not. Yeah,
It's going to take years of trying the
yeah.
better option to
Mhm.
undo some of those not so good things, right? So you can't expect to get it and grasp it
Mhm.
immediately. It
That's
is a process and something that we have to continuously do, right? It's something we work towards every day. And I absolutely love the name of your company, Surviving Today. Because
thank you.
I don't know how many times, whether I'm working with somebody with depression or I'm doing some grief work, where the goal is just survive the day.
Yeah. One thing is I believe that, it's about surviving, reviving, and I mean, surviving, thriving, and reviving. You know,
Mm,
so that's often what I try to tell folk that, you there are stages. You're surviving. Initially you're surviving. You're figuring out how to make this thing work for you, and it doesn't always make sense. And then when then there's a part where you just you're thriving. You're getting there, and it's making sense. But part of it, I think, is reviving,
yeah.
understanding that now you're better. Now you're healed. Now what can you do for the next person?
Mm,
You know, and so it's like kind of how they say a lot. You play it forward.
yes.
You're learning how to give back out into the universe the things that you learned
Right.
through it. So that's so I want to give my wife it, the the credit comes from her. She's the one that so it surviving today. She's the
Mm,
one. I give her credit because it was from something that she had started. Like her, it was her. She did a how can I say it? Okay, she it was an email that she had,
mm,
a email address that she had, and this sort of comes directly from that,
love it.
so it's all about going through bad days, but it doesn't mean that those bad days swallow you.
Yes.
You're learning to
Yes.
just
I
learn.
love it. I appreciate you so much for coming on and starting the conversation for the men. This is something that I don't take lightly because I know the impact that it can have. So I really appreciate you joining me today. I like to end uh the
Mhm.
episodes with a reflection question. And so
Okay.
I'm actually gonna have two. So for those of you who are watching
Okay.
this podcast, you can
Okay.
type it in the chat, you can share, or
Mhm.
just think about it. So, and you don't have to answer, Mr. Jones. This is for the people. But what emotion did you learn was not okay to express? So that's something I want the people to share in the chat. But I also want to leave this question. What do you wish people understood about you without having to explain it? These are questions I want you guys to think about
Mhm.
and start a discussion amongst yourselves. I hope that you got something valuable out of today's lesson where you were encouraged to undo that negative messaging for the boy who was told not to cry. You are a human, you were created with these human emotions, and you have the right to feel what you feel. We don't want you to get stuck in those feelings. We want you to work through those feelings, but we want you to feel them because you have the right to feel how you feel. You have the right to express yourself in a healthy manner, and you have the right to be vulnerable in the times when vulnerability is something that you feel safe being and feeling. Mr. Jones, you have anything you want to share before we end our episode today?
I just want to say, I think, we just, first of all, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be here. I mean, I am honored to be here with your viewers. And I always wish you like the best. You know how we do. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Um, you know, um, I would just, I just want to say, just basically just to say that, you know, if there are people in your lives that have that don't that are not there yet, have give space for
Mm.
patience.
Mm.
Give space for that ability to know that they can get there. You
Yeah.
know, people may not be there, may not be where we are or where we want them, and there could be reasons why they're not there. But
Mm.
we just we need to give space to for them to get there. And
Mm.
because I really believe people will get there in their own due time,
Yeah.
and that's it.
I appreciate it. Man, patience. Be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient for those who are still learning. Be
Yes.
patient with those who still need to unlearn some of those negative lessons that might be shaping their life in a negative way. Be patient as they learn to find a way to not only survive, to thrive and revive. I love that so much. Thank you so much for everyone watching. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
you. Till next time, we are going to continue this conversation for the men, and I'm so excited. Uh, until next time, thank you for tuning in to the Self